Hello everyone, it's Jimmy here, and today we're going to talk about Leica 35mm Summicron aspherical. Now, since the release of the Apple Summicron, people have sort of shifted their attention from the original Summicron ASPH to the new one. Not a lot of people are talking about the old Summicron anymore, and even back in the days, a lot of people prefer the version 4 Summicron, which is also known as the King of Bokeh or the 7mm, over the modern version, which is the aspherical or ASPH version of the Summicron. And because of that, the price of the 35 Summicron ASPH on the second-hand market is actually quite a bit cheaper than the older version, the version 4 these days, which makes it sort of a relatively affordable choice. Now, I realized that I haven't really shared my thoughts on this lens too much on my channel before. I've always been focused on, the 7-element, even the 6-element, or the Apple Summicron, which I did a review briefly. I thought it would be a good time to talk about these three lenses right here. Now, you might be asking why you've got three Summicron ASPHs here. Well, because they're all different, and I quite like this lens, to be honest. That's why I bought three of them. The first one is the V1 of the Summicron ASPH. I've got a silver one here, which is made out of brass, so it's super heavy. It feels hefty in your hand, and it just felt very well made. Now, this lens, compared to the newer version, which is the version 2 of ASPH Summicron, the differences are mainly the number of aperture blade. This newer one has 9 and the old one's got 8. And also for the newer version, even if you buy the silver one, it's silver anodized, so it's not made out of brass. It's much lighter, just like this black one here. It's also very well made. I wouldn't say one is better than the other, but because of the different materials that was used, you can definitely feel there's a difference, especially when you're adjusting your aperturing. This brass one is just a little bit more metallic, if you will. Aside from these two aspects, I don't really see too much of a difference in terms of image quality. Even though some people argue the second version, is optimized for higher megapixel digital Leica sensors, but truth be told, I haven't noticed any difference in terms of sharpness, at least on my copies. Now, the third lens here is quite a special one. This is the Leica 35mm f2 Summicron in the form of an 8-element first version Summicron. What you'll notice here is it's also made out of brass, so it's quite heavy, just like the first version. And aside from that, it's also got 8 aperture blades like the first version, because it was released when the first version is still around. So aside from the housing, everything else should be the same as the first version. And this has got a limited run of 500 units, I believe. And it's just such a beautiful lens. When you compare it to, this more modern design on the left, I actually quite prefer this older, more vintage design. Now you know that there's three of these guys out there that looks quite different, but performed identically. And so I just want to share with you some of the photos I've taken with these lenses on both a digital Leica body and a film Leica body. And then we'll talk about it a little bit after that. All right, let's take a look. Okay, so how do you like the photos? I personally think it's definitely not a bad lens, but it's also not a perfect lens like the Apple Summicron. What I've found is you always notice purple fringing in some harsh conditions, but it's definitely not a deal breaker because you can easily fix that, in a second or two in a post. And also, the lens is not critically sharp when shoot wide open on the edge of the frame, unlike the Apple Summicron, which is always perfectly sharp across the frame. And this might or might not be an issue. I mean, usually you wouldn't shoot landscapes wide open, right? But I actually found, even if you do that, there's this sort of very unique rendering and very unique feel to a photo when you shoot a landscape at f2. It's not always a bad thing. Like, you don't actually always have to focus stack and make every part of your image sharp. I think that is just, I think that is totally personal preference because, for example, like this photo here, when you got really good depth to it, it's perfectly acceptable to have sort of blurred out bits in a photo. It actually makes it look a little bit more like a medium format photo. And when you do that, you'll notice, I wouldn't call it muddy, but like not superly clean and sharp edges when you're viewing these photos. And that's just how this lens performs. But if you stop it down a little bit to, f4, f5.6, then this issue is largely eliminated. And I would imagine that's how you would normally use this lens actually when you're shooting streets or, shooting landscapes, of course. I intentionally did most of the shots here at f2 just to show you, the character of this lens. And most people probably wouldn't always shoot at f2 unless they're shooting portraits. So yeah, I think in today's market, if you look at the price of these second-hand Leica glasses, like I mentioned, the 7-element, the 8-element, and even the 6-element, this lens is positioned at a place where I would call a very high performance to cost ratio. So if you like the character of this lens and you're not cult followers of, like the 7-element or the 8-element, I think you might want to consider this lens, especially because there are, so many different versions of this lens out there, and you will probably find the one that aesthetically pleasing to you. So yeah, that's it for today's video. Please leave your comments down below, share your experience with this lens if you've got one, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one.